Hi there. I'm going to do a review for the movie Mad Max. This movie came out in 1979 and directed by George Miller. Um, this movie, this whole movie and this whole franchise is not like the Terminators or RoboCops or Predators or Alien franchise. Kind of went under the radar for quite a long time. I mean, I'm sure most people have heard of Mad Max, but they don't really know what it's referring to because it has Mel Gibson in it, and because Mel Gibson became such a huge star in the later years in the 80s, yeah, it sort of became a film synonymous with Mel Gibson, but he never really. I don't think most people are that familiar with it. It's more or less about the postal. It's about Australia that's starting to fall apart, and that's the whole joke of the movie is that it's Australia having problems. Now, granted, I don't really know. I don't know that people don't realize that Australia is always falling apart. I guess that's the big joke in the movie. Is this isn't really a movie per se. This is a documentary about Australia falling apart. It's the fact that Australia always looks like that. But nonetheless, no, Mad Max is that movie that. Actually, it's kind of curious to call it Mad Max because he doesn't really have too much trouble right at the start. It's not until the end that the problems really happen. More or less, the whole story is that Australia is there's like there's an energy shortage. There's an energy shortage, and more or less there's people fighting out in the outback areas because they're having problems getting energy. Law and order starting to have a problem. Although to me, the movie doesn't really do a very good job. The movie's kind of like a really low budget movie, so most of it's just about the fact that the Australian outback is really, wild at this point. They're starting to lose control of those areas. The police force is weakening, although I'm not entirely sure why the police force where they are is all centered in the city. I guess that's part of the budgeting problem. I guess the police forces out in the towns must be starting to lose power or something. There must be a lack. So the police forces in the city are trying to maintain some semblance of control. But more or less, it's a post-apocalyptic world where there's an energy crisis. Now, this of course did come in the wake of what was a real energy crisis going on in the world at the time, which was the oil embargoes. So that kind of made sense. They did think that energy would be in trouble within 10 or 20 years. Um, but yeah, the movie stars Mel Gibson as Max, and has got a wife, Joanne Samuel or whatever, Jesse, and then there's Hugh Byrne as Toe Cutter, and that's kind of like the whole point of the movie is that Toe Cutter leads a gang in the Australian outback, and they're causing a lot of problems because the police can't maintain control over them. Haven't been able to haven't been able to beat them. More or less, the problem is that Australia is in decline, and there's a lot of problems out there. So so the whole movie is basically centered on the fact that Mad Max is dealing with all the different problems. Him and his buddy, they're all having the same problem is that they're trying to go out in the Australian outback and maintain law and order, and these gangs are starting to cause problems for them. Nonetheless, indeed, actually, one of the most famous things about this movie is the car, and the car does get introduced fairly early on. It's basically some Australian car. It's I don't know. I don't hit the cars they're using are already not too bad. I mean, there's nothing really wrong with them. It's just the fact this one represents it's a supercharged car V8, well, fuel injected they call it because of course I think in Australia they were using a lot of fuel injected engines because of the engine type. They were basically English cars. But more or less, yeah, Australia, yeah, is experiencing the fallouts of an energy crisis. And one of the biggest moments in the movie is actually Max's friend there goes out in the wilderness and is trying to go on a bit of a joyride almost. He's just checking out the local problems in the towns, and the gangs all attack him and get rid of him. And this sets up the entire act, the third act. They're like the whole movie's had problems with this. Is that there's various points where they're having problems with accents and stuff because the gangs are losing control. There's one scene where Max shows up on, and it's fairly obvious that gang violence has been an issue and that people are having problems out here. There's lots of people that are getting injured and there's a lot of killing, and they're having a lot of problems. Nonetheless, I don't know. It's kind of a funky film because it sets up so much. It's trying to set up some stuff, and I think that's where the movie kind of runs into a problem. Those two is the lack because of the lack of a significant budget. They're having a lot of trouble in this movie establishing where is where. Like, is the city, is the police force out in the country actually, is the Australian police force is actually still intact? And it doesn't appear to be that they're actually very well intact. In fact, it seems like it's quite dangerous for them to go into the country. Although, not entirely clear, because it just seems like this is just a standard issue in the late 70s, the world is falling apart movie. Nonetheless, I think another problem is that this there is a scene fairly early on with the gangs. There's a couple that tries to get away from this town that the gangs have invaded, and of course the gangs go after this couple, and they're in a car that's not capable of outgunning the gang. So in other words, bad things happen. Apparently something really bad happened with the girl. The cops had to deal with it. They find them and they're trying to deal with it. But I think that's where the problems of these movies starts, is that the three different go into more with the next movies, but in this movie, no, Mel doesn't really lose it until the end, when it's basically he goes on because of his friend getting killed. He more or less goes out to the country. He more or less goes on sabbatical for a little bit. They go on vacation. They go out to this resort town. And in the resort town, they meet the gang. The gangs catch up with them, and they cause problems for them. And then the worst thing happens is that his wife and his child ends up uh, getting hit, and that was the thing. Is that sets him off, and that sets off for the final scene. Is Max goes out and basically he takes care of the problem in a big way. He deals with it. He gets rid of all of them. All the gang members are eliminated. Gets best of revenge against the one guy who murdered his friend. Gets other revenge against other people, and more or less, yeah, it's all about him getting rid of the problems. They're having a lot of problems out in the country, not just a few problems. But nonetheless, this movie, I don't know. There's a few subplots in this movie, although it's not entirely clear what is the established subplot. There's one involving the friend. Apparently, is at the bar, and there's a female singer that he must be trying to develop a relationship with, and of course I believe they have a night out or something like that. I don't remember the movie terribly well. Problem with this movie is there's so much. It's say the budgeting. Of course, the budgeting was really low on this movie, so there's a lot of things they don't really show all that well. It's just, I think that's the worst thing about it, is that there's so many things that aren't particularly well shown. I guess there is a scene early on where, of course, they got two people in a car. It's a known gang guy, and of course he gets killed. They take care of him, but not before he does a whole bunch of damage and deals a whole bunch of trouble on the roads. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting film, but I feel like it's almost lacking in the sense that the budgeting just isn't there, and to me they're trying to do too much with what they got. they're trying to establish Law and Order breaking down, but they can't really get into it too much because there's just too much to show. Um, but yeah, nonetheless, Max at the end goes nuts, and that's I guess where the term Mad Max comes from. It's just what happens at the end, but it really doesn't happen until the tail end of the movie. I think the biggest problem is they're trying to do too much with this film. They don't have the budgeting for it to show what's actually wrong. They just indicate there's an energy crisis and that the major powers of the world are running out of energy and that they're going to be in a severe problem. But yeah, it's set off a franchise. I mean, there's more movies that came, the Fury Road and the Furiosa, but nonetheless, it's Mad Max. This is the first movie. How this compares to the last movies, not really. We'll get into that later. But yeah, decent enough film, Mad Max.